Hello, everyone. Joe Rodriguez here with another St. Joseph chat. And today I have the honor of having Aaron Joseph, St. Joseph Apostle number one. Aaron, thanks so much for joining.
No, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you. So we're going to jump right into it. You love our patron so much that you changed your last name legally to Joseph. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I entered the church back in 1990, actually on December 8th, 1990. And then I discerned religious life in 92, 93 with a few different communities. And, in some of these communities, as we know, some traditional communities, they take a new name. And um, and so, basically I was just, when I was discerning with these communities, I was just known as Brother Aaron. And and then I noticed that like one time I was sorting mail and I noticed that, Brother Elias was known by, and I'll just throw out a name as John Smith in the world. And, he would still get mail as John Smith, even though, he's Brother Elias. And when I was sorting the mail, I was thinking, if I ever did take a new name, I would want to do it legally. So it was just a thought. And then my pre-spiritual director, who Father Stanley Smolensky,
Mhm.
once in a while we would talk about, our own spiritualities, and we would talk about, what we would do if we were to take a new name. And so, we both knew that, I would take, Aaron Joseph. And then one day after morning mass, I went into the rectory, and he comes out into the kitchen, and he's like, it's all set. And I'm like, well, what's all set? He says, I asked the pastor if we could call you Brother Aaron Joseph.
Oh,
And at the
yes.
time when he said it, it just didn't feel right. Sometimes you have these ideas, and then once something goes to initiate something, the pastor said, that's okay, just put it in the bulletin. So they put it in the bulletin, and it was funny because our school principal at the time, she didn't like the idea because my vows were private vows, they were public vows. I wasn't part of a church approved
Okay.
association. So and then actually somebody called up the chancery and complained. so
Oh,
so
brother.
Father Stanley mentioned it to me. I won't get into more detail about it, but he just mentioned it. And when he mentioned that somebody had complained, I kind of blurted out, "Well, I'll just do it legally." But then I quieted down and I said, "Well, Lord, only if you want it to happen. Your will be done." And
Right.
then later on, I was nominated for a school volunteer of the year for the archdiocese. Every school has two. For our parish school, I was nominated this one year, and so the church secretary was putting it into the bin, and she put it in as, my last name used to be Brooks, and she put it in like Aaron Joseph and in parentheses Brooks, and I'm like, and she showed it to me, and I'm like, oh, I hate that. It sounds like you're half in and half out. And she immediately just said, well, you can change it legally. Now, I had never told her, the backstory, which had just given you. And so I just listened. And
Mhm.
she had a situation where one of her children had to go through a process, with somebody. And so she was aware of how to go through the legal means of changing a name.
Mhm.
And I remember the day only because, everything kind of fit into the place afterwards. And so it was September 30th of 1996. Not that the year matters, but um and uh and so she's like, we'll call up the probate court and find out, how long it will be before your hearing. And I'm like, oh, you have to have a hearing. And then, I found out that you have to have $100 filing fee. And so at the time I was living at home with my foster father. I grew up as a ward of the state, three foster homes, two institutions. And so I still, even though I was at that time I was 34, yeah. And but I was still, living at home. And so I called up my foster father and then kind of begged him for $100 because I wasn't working. I was just volunteering. You
Hmm.
know, I'd made private vows back in 1995, and so I was just helping out at my parish while I was still discerning, you know, what God wanted me to
Right.
do. And so the next day, um, you know, the secretary and I went down to the probate court, and I was given the application, and I filled out the application and handed the secretary the $100 bill, and and so I asked her. I said, "Well, you know, can you tell me when the hearing might be?" And you know, and the thing is, when I found out that, you know, I'm sorry, when I did call the probate court the day before, she said that it would probably be like 3 weeks. And so I was looking at the liturgical calendar because I believe God works with that. And
Mhm.
I was thinking, well, in 2 weeks would be Saint Teresa of Avila. That would be great because she loved Saint Joseph as a father.
Right.
And you know, looking at other various dates, and but I thought that would be the most ideal. And and when I, you know, that day when I handed in the application and $100 fee, and I asked the secretary, and she's like, "Well, we'll mail it to you." And I'm like, "Pretty please," you know, just. And so she just, you know, flipped over her calendar, and she's like, "Well, on October 15th, we're wide open." And so, you know, usually when I tell the story, I say, you know, on on 10/15, at 10/15, I was legally known as Aaron Joseph. So it was really cool. But you know, you can see divine providence in it, and at least I think so. So
Oh, absolutely. That's wonderful. So, do you think you would have changed your last name legally had it not been challenged in the church bulletin?
no, no, I wasn't. Even though Father Stanley and I talked about these things, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it was just kind of an identity that, you know, we thought about related to our own spiritualities, and you know, the things that
Hmm.
we valued and relationships that we valued. But no, no, it made me do it basically, you know, as it were, you know, because I wouldn't have just, you know, woke up one day and said, I'm going to do this. It was,
Hmm.
you know, the way it happened made it so.
Well, it worked out beautifully. Thanks be to God.
Yes. And you know, and for my own thought process, I look at, you know, one of the meanings that they say of the name Aaron is one of light or enlightener. And so the way I look at it is, you know, there's a couple meanings that I see. The idea of Aaron Joseph is, you know, one, a son of Joseph, you know, taking Joseph as my family name. And then also the idea of being a light to Joseph. And so that's the way I look at that. But it's more just for myself that, you know, like they say, with great gifts come great responsibilities. And so it's just something as a reminder to me that I have to live in such a way, and also, you know, share what I know as far as my apostolate goes, to be a light to Joseph. So,
So, something that just came to me, Aaron, in the Old Testament, when they were deciding who the high priest was, his rod blossomed as a sign
yeah,
from God. And that's traditionally how we say Joseph was chosen to be the spouse of Our Lady. His
there,
rod
there,
blossomed.
there yes, there is that also. Yeah.
So that's a beautiful little connection too with the two names.
There is.
So,
Sometime you know, maybe after the call, I'll send you there's an iconographer that he made an icon, you know, basically with the name Aaron Joseph, you know, tying in Aaron and Saint Joseph.
yeah, I'd love to see that.
And he
So,
did it independent of me. He just did it. I'm like, oh, I gotta
oh,
get that. Yeah.
God bless him.
Yeah.
So tell us about your apostolate. You have an apostolate and a website, ourpatron.net.
Yeah.
Give us some of the info.
So basically, um, I so like I said, I was discerning religious life.
Mhm.
I was discerning who God wanted me to follow, as it were. You know, who is my patron?
Right.
And you know, I discerned with two Franciscan communities. One was Capuchin, the other was a spin-off of the Conventuals, which lived more of a St. Maximilian Kolbe. You know, they're the Franciscans of the Immaculate. And then I also discerned with a Maronite contemplative
Mhm.
cloistered community. And And then also I was part of a men's group that was learning the spirituality of Saint Teresa, the Child Jesus. And, nothing seemed to click. And I, the way I describe it is, I got an invitation, as it were, through prayer. I was, I was at work. I had a delivery job, and I was praying my rosary as I always did, as long as I knew where I was going.
Mhm.
And I felt the presence of Saint Joseph come to me and ask me if I would be willing to learn about him. And that was
Wow.
really the beginning of all of this. But then there was also the presence of Our Lady, and I felt her ask me if I'd be willing to love her as Saint Joseph did. And then I felt the presence of the communion of saints. They love all of us, but I felt them share their love for me. And at the time, I was also praying like Saint Therese, who would pray, to all the saints to give her, a million times their spirit. So
Mhm.
I would pray in that way too. And to me, the whole thing was, and I came to grow in this over time, to grow in my understanding and appreciation of what I call Saint Joseph's place in the earthly Trinity. And it's a build upon, because while I was discerning, especially with the Franciscans of the Immaculate, and I was also studying St. Louis de Montfort's writings. So consecration to Our Lady was very big in my life, and so the whole idea of to Jesus through Mary,
Right.
and so what basically was, I believe, given to me was an appreciation of to Jesus through Mary in the spirit of Saint Joseph,
Mhm.
understanding the third, his place, as the third person of the earthly Trinity. Of course, Jesus being the first person, Mary being the second. And so basically, this apostolate is about that. It's about bringing to light, as it were, Saint Joseph's place in the earthly Trinity as patron of the Church and model of devotion to Mary. Pope Benedict XV, he and for the 50th anniversary of Saint Joseph being proclaimed patron of the Church, he had this document. He wrote this document back in 1920, and I might abuse the pronunciation, but it's like Bonum Sanae. Um, and in it, he says, the English translation is, in fact, through Joseph, we go directly to Mary, and through Mary to the origin of all holiness, Jesus. And the
Yeah.
second part of it, he says, who sanctified the domestic virtues by his obedience to Saint Joseph and Mary. And so I modified that, because originally he's talking about Joseph to Mary, Mary to Jesus, and I'm like,
Mhm.
well, in keeping consistent with that, not looking at it as just imitating Jesus and loving our parents, but really loving Joseph and Mary. So I modify that and saying, and again, this is also an extension of creation, because people who promote devotion to Our Lady said, we are to be devoted to Our Lady in imitation of Jesus. And I said, well, you're talking about that. You're also talking about Saint Joseph.
Yeah.
And so, my modification is, who consecrated devotion to both Joseph and Mary by his obedience to them. And that's really, why the word both is in there, because, again, this is a build upon. Father Stanley had written a paper for the Seventh International Symposium on St. Joseph back in 1996, seeing the work that I was doing, but also seeing some other apostolates that were promoting St. Joseph as model of husband and father.
Mhm.
It was entitled St. Joseph's Place in the Third Millennium. And, he saw it in the first millennium, it was all about, Jesus and the church, the dogmas defending, Christ and who he truly is. But then he saw the second millennia in general. It's not like a fine line at the year 2000,
Yeah.
year 1000, and all of a sudden it's a switch over or something. But he saw in the second millennia an increase in understanding and appreciation of the role of Our Lady. The great Marian saints, the Marian dogmas, cathedrals raised in her honor, etc.
Yeah.
And he was prophesying that he saw the third millennia being, an age of Saint Joseph, as it were. And I think we could all testify to that, that, we see that. I see that in your work. We see that in what Father Calloway did,
Mm,
Pope Francis, naming, 2020 to 2021, the year of St. Joseph,
yeah.
etc. So,
Absolutely. His time is now, and it's obvious by looking at the world why God kind of reserved him for our times, because more than ever, we need that father figure. We need that man of the house. We know we have to know how to be chaste men. I wanted to ask you, do you have any favorite prayers or devotions to Saint Joseph?
well, you know of my my litany to litany of the earthly Trinity,
Yes,
and
I
that
do.
that really is, it's my favorite prayer. Because it's a meditation, and it's also an intercessory prayer, but to the three, and that's, it's the way I look at devotion to Saint Joseph. I don't separate him, as it were, and I think overall, anybody who has devotion to any saint, you can't just isolate them. They're not islands.
Mhm.
It's all about their relationship to our Lord, and for some, also through Our Lady, explicitly. Um, so, like I said, to me, it's like every time I pray the litany, it just, we sometimes people talk about centering prayer, and it's like this prayer always brings me home.
Mhm.
If my mind or my activity has wandered, this always brings me back, and keeps me, focused on them, which I truly value.
It's an absolutely beautiful litany, and what I'll do is I'll put a link to it in the
Okay,
description
let me
for
let
the
me let me send you
another
the
one.
latest. Well, it was shortly after you had posted. Actually, I know it hasn't been tweaked since then, but there was two lines that I tweaked, and basically it was like the first one of Jesus, where I added, like, "Oh Jesus, you are the way and the truth and the life," because I thought, when I was beginning that section, I thought just to say Jesus, the way and the truth and life, I thought it was just too abrupt. So I added, "Oh
Okay.
Jesus." And then there was one line in the St. Joseph where, I mentioned, Jesus loved you. And then I put, just man who loved the new Eve as his father in spirit. Pray for
Mhm.
us, because I just, I don't know. It was just something I thought was important. Just to wrap it around the idea that Jesus loved you as his father in spirit, but, emphasizing, loved you, just man who loved the new Eve.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it is a very powerful litany, and the amount of reflection and meditation that happens while you're praying it, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's not just a dry litany. It's
no.
something that you have to invest yourself in when you're praying it. And it's it's just so inspiring and so theological. Like I love it.
Yeah.
So
Well, thanks be good. Thanks be to
yes.
God. Yes.
So I'm glad that you came up with that. Um,
Well,
if you were to meet Saint Joseph, say you're having a cup of coffee, and you could ask him one question, what would you ask him? What would you always have wanted to have asked him?
first of all, I would probably have a cup of tea.
Oh,
But,
okay.
no, no, just kidding. No, basically, while I think, the three main documents that I share universally are, as you know, the Apostolate Introduction,
Mhm.
the essay Saint Joseph's Place in the Earthly Trinity, and then the Litany. You know, I I think you know, I think they form a beautiful teaching. I think they're complete, but I would like confirmation of that. So to me, I would ask Saint Joseph, are these writings true and good, beneficial for everybody, and any tweaks necessary, still further, and basically that's what I would, because the thing is, whatever I share with others, I really want to be true and good. you know.
Oh, that's awesome. So you kind of want to get his stamp of approval on what you're
Yeah,
saying.
you know, and then
Yeah.
if anything needs to be tweaked, fine, let's tweak. You know, because I don't profess
Yeah.
to be perfect with anything here. So.
Oh, that's really good. So if people were wanting to develop a relationship or devotion to Saint Joseph, do you have any advice for maybe some beginners who don't really have anything to do with Saint Joseph but want to?
Well, I like I said, I believe in these three documents, and and I believe in the universality of what is expressed here. While some, especially men, may be husbands and fathers, and they may look at that aspect of their lives also in devotion to Saint Joseph. This is still the universal way, or a universal way of looking at devotion to
Yeah.
Saint Joseph. I would start there, and then if you need him, it's funny because you know um, I look at my own life, in my own devotion, as it were. First and foremost, it is this universal, this what I call Saint Joseph's unique, universal, and complementary place with Jesus and Mary.
Right.
And that's like the beginning focus. But then for my own self, I brought it to um, kind of a radical response, as it were, which is like a fourth document, which I have on my website. And it's for those who want to live as a consecrated disciple of Jesus, the Son of God and Son of Joseph and Mary, who
Oh,
will make, like I said, private vows, of chastity, poverty, and obedience, obedience to the spirit of Saint Joseph and the life nurturing wisdom that Mary is to pass on, as I express it. But like I said, but then there are others that wouldn't do that, aren't going to live as a consecrated,
mhm.
um, in that sense of, like I said, the evangelical councils, but they're um, fathers, husbands and fathers, and so they want to live that, and so they'll meditate on Saint Joseph in that way. But I still think there's this
Right.
universal, just like Mary. Mary can be for women, a model wife and mother for those that, of course, are married with children. But we know that she has a unique, universal, and complementary place with our Lord, and you know there's still that aspect that you can't just sit there and say, well, I love Mary as my model of wife and mother. There's that universal role, and the same thing with Saint Joseph. And so to me, I would encourage people to you know reflect on what is expressed in these documents. The one thing I like about having these three, the three pieces of paper, basically, with text on the front and back. And not that I'm saying anything against people like yourself who write books, but this information is free. It's easily accessible. Nobody has to buy a book. And again, not that I'm against anybody who writes books, but I just see an availability that's there for everybody. In the briefness of it is, that's there. It's not a book. It's
So
like I
that's
said,
on
it's
your,
basically six. It's basically 6 pages.
okay.
But then
So that's
also,
on,
go
sorry,
ahead.
that's on ourpatron.net, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, and and especially continue, to like start praying with the litany and continue with it, because like I can pray it, and I think yourself, you can pray it, especially after reading the first two documents, which a lot of the teaching is based on quotes that are in those two documents.
Yeah.
And we can pick it up, but I think sometimes when somebody who is coming cold and is picking this up for the first time, you know and just like with any, people could read a paragraph and they might get, some of the thought of the author, but it just sometimes it takes repeated reading of something,
Mhm.
and it's the same thing. It's just meditation, and it's like to repeatedly do it over time, asking for guidance. And of course, that's what the intercessory prayer is we're asking our Lord, Our Lady, and Saint Joseph to help us understand, their roles and enter into them. And so just give it time. Don't just like, read it, especially the prayer, just read it, kind of rote and just let it go, but really pray it, meditatively and do it over time. Let it really sink in to the meaning of all the lines. So
My priest friend used to always say with stuff like that, always just let it simmer. You don't have to get it
yes,
right away. Just let
yeah,
it simmer.
yeah,
And
yeah,
especially in Catholicism, there's so many beautiful devotions and texts out there, and some of it can seem overwhelming at first, but
right,
you know,
yeah,
take what you can and let it simmer. The rest will come.
100%.
So, Aaron, did you have anything else that you'd like to share before we call this a night?
No,
Anything on your mind?
I appreciate the opportunity to share this. You know, I guess one other thing I would ask Saint Joseph is, where do we go from here? You know, um,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be open. Like, I try to live this myself. I try to advance in wisdom and grace as I age, as it were. By just growing in it, just growing in the perfection of it, getting better, and living it every day. Is there a possibility of, I would think, especially other men joining, making that consecration, or living that consecrated life in imitation of Saint Joseph? That's the one thing that, we look at Saint Joseph, or there's some that look at Saint Joseph as model husband and father, but you got three virgins that were in that family.
Yeah.
And and we know that Mary is a model of religious life too. She's not just a model wife and mother, but she's a
Right.
model of religious life. And you could say the same thing about Saint Joseph. And so there is this other level of, while there's a universal truth for everybody that he's patron of the church, therefore he's patron of each and every one of us.
Yeah.
And we need to understand and appreciate his relationship to Mary and to Jesus through Mary. And
So, oh,
but the thing is, I think there's also another level for and I think maybe for some men, who would live this in a radical to a radical degree, and then share that universal truth. Um,
mhm.
and so, I'm open to that if that's God's will.
So a quick question. To do this consecration, do you would you have to be a virgin in order to do that? Because I know
No,
that there would be a vow of celibacy, right? But if you're
no,
already
no, yeah, no, no. Um,
okay.
you know, to be transparent,
Mhm.
I'm not a virgin. So, I was engaged twice. It was like, you know, I
It's
was,
never
but
too
but
late.
but the thing is, it's like, no, there is the idea of chastity. As a matter of fact, that's
Yeah.
the wording I use is chastity.
Okay.
And so, you know, to live that after you make the
Hmm.
vow of change, and same thing with poverty, it's it's not a strict, like, you can't own anything, but it's,
Right.
as I word it, it's, it doesn't exceed the needs of vita consecrata, or the consecrated life.
Hmm.
We need things, but it's not like I don't own a home, I don't own stocks, I don't own this, I don't own that, and I
Hmm.
purposely do that. I have a car, I have things that I
Hmm.
need in order to live and to do what I need to do.
So
Um,
just to live humbly, basically.
yeah, yeah, but to live my consecrated life, that's the focus. And then, like I said, the obedience is, to the spirit of Saint Joseph. In other words, his love, his devotion to Mary,
Hmm.
and in doing so, being obedient to her, understanding that she is the teacher of the whole church. Her
Yeah.
role is to lead us to Jesus, um, most intimately, and again, along with what Pope Benedict XV wrote. Through Joseph, we go directly to Mary, and through Mary to the origin of all holiness. So,
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to kind of sit and chat about our patron, St. Joseph. I really do appreciate it. I know we've been trying to connect for a little while, and I'm glad that it finally happened. I'm very grateful to you.
amen. I'm grateful for you, Joe. Thank you very much.